Tarzan of the Apes, brought to you from out the pages of Edgar Rice Burroughs' thrilling book. Tarzan watches the result of his terrifying call of warning. He sees Sheeta's glossy form slink behind the cover of a spreading mimosa bush. Then turns his head to find Clayton staring up at him in utter amazement. Tarzan regards the young Englishman curiously. Gracefully poised on the tip of a swaying limb, the ape man watches the color flood back into Clayton's face. The jungle, which had momentarily stilled at Tarzan's warning cry, stirs again to life. From the solid mass of tall trees comes the shrill piping of jungle birds, intermittently broken by the deeper notes of the larger birds. Half hidden by the dense verdure, Manu the monkey chatters and scolds. The high sun, filtering through the lacy maze of vivid green, floods the clearing with flashes of gold. Tarzan's bronze body melts into the shadows. With the ease and skill born of years of habit, he drops limb by limb, branch to branch behind the dense screen of tropic leaves, and lands on the moss-deadened ground behind Clayton. The Englishman wheels around, reaches for his rifle, stops when he sees Tarzan.
Thanks, old man. You certainly saved my life.
Tarzan says nothing. Curiously, he examines Clayton's clothing. He runs his hand over the woolly texture of the khaki hunting shirt. Clayton turns to face the ape man. Tarzan grips him by the shoulders, spins him around. Into Clayton's mind flashes the memory of the warning note pinned to the door of the hut.
You must be Tarzan of the Apes.
Tarzan pays no attention. Now he's examining Clayton's boots.
By Jove. I say, don't you talk?
By way of answer, Tarzan pulls Clayton's right foot from under him and continues his minute examination of the strange white man's leather feet. Clayton struggles to regain his balance.
Look here, old chap. Don't you think this has gone far enough?
Tarzan lets Clayton's foot go. He reaches for the rifle, but Clayton's too quick. The Englishman tries to get his hand over the trigger guard. Tarzan grips barrel and stock. He twists. Clayton winces, his fingers caught in the guard. They sway from side to side. Tarzan raises his arms above his head. Clayton hangs by his fingers to the trigger guard. He can't hang on. His fingers slip between the trigger and guard. He tries to draw them clear. He can't. Meanwhile, back at the hut, Jane, her father, and Philander discuss Clayton's prolonged absence.
I completely fail to comprehend why a practical man like Clayton does not return.
Oh, do you suppose anything could have happened to him?
Almost anything might happen in this wilderness.
Don't worry, Jane. I'm sure Cecil is perfectly capable of taking care of himself.
Yes, of course he is. Dear me, so many things have happened. I've hardly had time to write a line in my notebook. Dear me, I had built such high hopes of finding the treasure in order that it might defray my archaeological research costs.
Oh, did it ever occur to you, Daddy, that perhaps there might not be any treasure, that it all might be a hoax? Oh, dear, what has happened to Cecil?
Oh, tut, Jane, I'm perfectly convinced by internal evidences deduced by me from the map.
Well, mightn't it have been a forgery?
Yes, perhaps. To be perfectly fair in my judgment, it might have been a forgery. However, I feel that such an eventuality is remotely negligible.
Well, have you thought that there might be a duplicate map of the treasure location?
Duplicate map?
Why, yes. I've read in books about pirates that it sometimes happens that one of the crew makes a map for himself unknown to the captain. Then he can come back and steal the treasure for himself later. Oh, dear, I wonder where Cecil is.
Well, really, most interesting, my dear. I must admit that the possibility of such a thing had escaped me. Perhaps. Yes, it is quite a possibility. But I fear it is too much to hope. I fear the mutineers have absconded with our treasure and are probably even now dissipating the proceeds.
Oh, it's not the treasure we should be worrying about now, Daddy. It's Cecil. It seems hardly likely that he would have stayed away as long as this.
You're right, my dear. Then, as you suggested, we had better prosecute a search.
Professor, hadn't I better remain with Jane?
Why, certainly not. Nothing will harm me.
And then we will proceed at once. Come, Philander.
If Cecil returns while you are gone, I will fire one shot. That will be the signal for you to come back.
Splendid idea.
Why, yes, one shot. Remember, Philander, one shot. I shan't forget.
Now keep within sight of the cabin.
But, my dear, if we keep within sight of the cabin, it will seriously impair the efficiency of the search.
Well, be very, very careful then.
We shall be careful.
Well, come, Philander. Let us enter the primeval fastness. Here, now, please point that rifle either at the ground or at the sky.
You lead, Professor. Have no fear, I've handled rifles before.
Oh, do be careful.
Yes, my dear. Does it not appear reasonable to you, my dear Philander, that in any sort of serious research work...
Look, Professor. There's a broken branch. That means Clayton has passed this way.
Again, my dear Philander, you are indulging in that most mentally debilitating habit against which I have so frequently warned you. That of jumping hastily at conclusions. The process of reasoning...
Quite so, Professor. But I read in some book, I can't recall at this moment the title, that the aborigines of these regions unerringly read such signs in the forest.
But I might call your attention to a faulty major premise, Mr. Philander. You are not an aborigine. And... our friends in the treetop evidently agree with my scientific conclusions.
Apropos, I believe we're out of sight of the cabin. And Jane said...
Right. Jane did say for us to remain within sight of the cabin. But might she not have meant hearing rather than sight? I wonder, since an acoustic rather than a visual signal was arranged.
She's not, Professor. There's a mimosa branch, broken at just the height of a man's hand. I am sure Clayton passed here.
Most interesting. I must make a note.
Let us press forward a piece, Professor. We may yet overtake Clayton.
Yes. The mimosa, when crushed, gives off a pungent odor. Would you describe the odor as pungent, Philander? Or should I say...
Oh, say whatever you please, but hurry! We must find Cecil.
One moment, Philander. Do not be so precipitous, I say. Pungent odor, yes. I would describe it as pungent. And in that connection, I might also mention that the female of a certain species of fruit fly... Bless me. Well, what was that?
Rifle shot. Clayton must have got back. Come, Professor. Come on, let's be going.
Come on. Hurry.
Back in the hut, Jane hears the shot. She thinks of Clayton or her father may have fired it and goes to the door. A growl stops her in her tracks. Before the hut stands Sabo the lioness. Jane leaps back into the hut and slams the door. With anxious, fumbling fingers, she drops the locking bar into place. With a snarl of rage, Sabo leaps. Her heavy body crashes against the barrier. Jane stands behind the door, trembling. The lioness scratches at the rough planking between her and her prey. Sniffing and growling, she circles the hut. She stops, looks at the barred window. She raises herself on her hind legs. Forepaws on the sill, she glares through the window. Sabo sees Jane watching at the end of the hut. The wicked eyes gleam. The long, brutal claws work convulsively. She tests the bars with her huge paw. She drops to the ground, gathers her haunches under her, crouching. With a roar, she hurls herself upward. She crashes against the wooden bars. They creak under the terrific impact. They hold. Sabo strips back to the ground. She makes for the door, hurls herself forward again with terrific force. The door holds. Sabo again eyes the window with its slim bars. She screams. The bars snap. Sabo's huge paw slips through the opening. Another bar snaps and another. The brute closes its eyes, forces its great tawny head through the window. Jane looks at the brutish head framed in the window. Desperation seizes her. She steps back. She sees a revolver lying on the bunk. She snatches it, throws the weapon up, and pulls the trigger. Bullet hits Sabo in the shoulder. With a mingled roar of rage and pain, the lioness drops to the ground. She crouches. Screams! Jane carries the brute halfway through the window. Frantically, Jane presses the trigger again and again. Again and again, the hammer snaps down on the empty shell. Tarzan of the Apes, brought to you from out the pages of Edgar Rice Burroughs' adventurous book, James calls for help, and the shattering crash of the revolver shot carries to Tarzan and Clayton standing face to face in the jungle.
James!
Never! Tarzan seizes Clayton and swings him to his shoulders. Clayton struggles futilely and then stops. Surely this man who has rescued him from the leopard can mean him no harm. Tarzan springs into the lower branches of a great tree. He grips a trailing vine and, in spite of his double burden, swings into the lower terrace of the forest. Up he goes into the bending, swaying branches of the higher terrace. His sure eye and practiced hands carry them with incredible speed through the maze of interwoven vines and branches. Faster and faster they speed toward the hut. Now the foliage is less dense. Tarzan's penetrating gaze sees Sabor, crouched, ready to hurl her bulk at the frail latticed window of the hut. She screams. The light bars give under her hurtling weight. Tarzan knows the lattice will not withstand many such shocks. He leaps into space, grips a sturdy vine, a dizzy, flashing rock. He lets go, grips the lower branch. It bends. Again he lets go. Down he drops. He disappears into a deep well of tree fern and bamboo. Spinning, swinging downward from branch to vine, he plunges toward the jungle floor. Tarzan's feet touch the ground. Clayton flies to his back. Together they race toward the hut, clearing the intervening ground with lightning speed. Sabor leaps. The last bar snaps. The great yellow head and four paws are inside the hut. Tarzan covers the last few feet with a flying leap. He seizes Sabor by the tail. Twist. Flings his body back. Feet raced against the hut. Pulls with all his mighty strength. Clayton grasps the man is trying to help. Tarzan shouts to Clayton to plunge a poisoned arrow into Sabor. The Englishman can't understand the ape man's orders. Sabor's clawing, fighting to force her way into the window. With a snarl of rage, she lets go her clutch on the sill, the twist, and pounce upon the enemy behind her. Tarzan lets go. With the speed of a striking cobra, he launches himself full on the infuriated beast's back. Like lightning, his arm encircles the brute's neck. He digs his feet into Sabor's loins. Tarzan's biceps swell. Back. Inch by inch, he pulls the tawny, twisting head. Sabor throws herself on her side, thrashing, tearing. Her working claws barely miss Clayton as he leaps aside. Porter and Philander break through the brush bordering the jungle. One glance through the doors and struggling with Sabor, they start to run toward them. Sabor twists her head. The snapping, foaming jaws try to reach the arm of steely muscle about her throat. Tarzan tries to get his knife. Sabor springs to her feet. She leaps into the air. Harder and harder, Tarzan pulls the flashing head. Now he has his knife. Back, he forces Sabor's straining neck. The knife flashes up. Down! Again and again, the gleaming blade rises and falls, plunges deep into Sabor's unprotected side. Slowly, the lioness crumples to the ground. Tarzan leaps aside, taps his foot on Sabor's neck, raises his face to the sky. The victory cry of the bull ape that has made his kill echoes and re-echoes through the jungle. Tarzan glances once at Clayton, reaches for a low-hanging branch, and swings himself into the tree.
Jane, are you hurt?
No, I'm all right.
My dear.
Jane,
My darling, I was looking for you. I heard the call like
Now, please wait a minute. Just a second. One at a time, please.
Oh, I heard a shot. I thought Cecil had returned. And when I went to the door, there was a lion. I slammed the door. Then came a terrible scratching. Then it stopped. For the moment, I thought it had gone away. The next thing I knew, its terrible yellow eyes were glaring at me from the window. Oh, for hours it seemed as though I couldn't move. Then I remembered the revolver. I shot him.
Yes, Jane, we heard the shot. You had came from the hut and... Well, you know the rest.
The most amazing exhibition I have ever witnessed. Philander and I arrived precisely at the moment when the pagan person leapt upon the back of the lion. Such strength, such astounding agility.
He saved me only a few moments before we heard Jane's shot. I was attacked by a leopard, but just as the beast was about to
Do you think that he's Tarzan of the Apes?
Tarzan of the Apes? Oh, no, I don't believe it can be. Cecil spoke to him, but he doesn't speak English. Tarzan can read and write English, we know, because of the warning he pinned to the door of the hut. But, Cecil, this man did speak to you in some strange tongue.
Ah, you say he spoke to Cecil?
Yes, he shouted something to me while he was fighting with the lion.
Exactly. It proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that he, as I have never doubted, has had contact with other humans. Now, Clayton, what sort of sounds did he shout to you?
Well, Oh, by Jove, I'm dashed if I can remember.
Did he make any such sound as la? Or perhaps lass?
No, I remember no such sound. Why?
Sir Richard Paget has worked out 320 primitive roots from which all Aryan language is derived. The sound thus, la, the dropping of the tongue and pressing of the tongue against the teeth signifies las, to lift. I thought perhaps if he lifted you or wished to lift something, he might have said la.
No, I'm sure there was no such sound. He did shout something, as near as I can recall, which sounded like cow or bund.
There was no L sound? You're quite sure?
Of course, Professor, in the excitement, I could not really qualify as a scientific observer.
No, of course not, of course not. Still, I wish you had been able to retain some definite syllabic context. Perhaps a lust sound.
Well, still, Daddy, it's evident the man has some sort of rational language, even if he could not convey his thought to Cecil.
No doubt of it, Jane, no doubt of it. The mere fact that Clayton recognized the shout as some attempt to convey information or direction...
My thought exactly. Then the fact would show that the man is social, tribal.
Well, it's getting frightfully cold out here. Let's go inside the hut. And Cecil...
Yes, Jane?
I think before any of us tries to sleep here, after the experience we've just had, we ought to get some sort of that window barred in some sort of way that will prevent anything like this happening again.
I thoroughly agree. And tonight it will be fixed.
Well, thank you, Cecil.
Come, give me a hand, Professor. Let's move this carcass away from the hut.
Yes, perhaps we might as well. Bless me. We two cannot even budge it. Yet the man who killed it held it with one arm. Astounding.
Don't bother moving that. It'll be gone in the morning. The jackals, you know. Why, yes, of course. How silly of me.
Captain Philander, it was a natural, if I may be permitted the expression, a most natural thought.
Yeah, of course. I realize that Jane has been through a harrowing experience and so on, but do you suppose perhaps we might, well, in short, are we to have dinner?
Really, Philander, that is quite a good suggestion. Now that you've broached the subject, I feel that I myself could do with something to fortify the inner man.
I really hate to say anything to Jane.
It is rather, isn't it? However, it will take her mind off the excitement. Yes, I feel we should soothe her in some manner domestic.
Then, with your approval, Professor, let us enter the hut.
Very well. Jane, my dear.
Daddy?
Jane, my love, could you prepare a nice collation? In other words, something to eat?
The light from the cabin streams across the clearing, cutting the jungle into strips of black and silver. Animal trails, mere breaks in the brush by day, now loom like yawning caverns in their inky blackness. From afar off, the harsh, rasping laugh of a hyena tells that the scavenger of the jungle has found some undevoured kill. One by one, the stars pierce the sable sky. The young moon, slender as a silver thread, glints through the sparse tops of the alders. Sleepy monkeys open and close their eyes as Tarzan leisurely brushes his way through the branches toward the hut. Just as the ape, which for sheer joy of living swings by the hour from branch to branch, so Tarzan, fed and rested, drops to the light-flooded clearing at the hut. Cautiously, he approaches the window, looks inside. With quickened pulse, entranced, he watches the white she he had rescued earlier in the day, seated at the table, his table. He longs to speak to her, but dares not, convinced that, like the men, she will not understand him. Jane Porter finishes the letter she's been writing to her friend, rises, and puts out the light. Patiently, Tarzan waits until his keen ears tell him that all movement within the hut has ceased for the night. Cautiously, he moves closer to the window. He hears the deep, regular breathing which denotes sleep. Slowly, carefully, he passes his hand through the broken lattice, takes the letter from the table. Quietly, he moves back, folds the paper, places it in his quiver with his arrows, and melts into the jungle shadows while the hyena creeps forward to the dead body of Sable. Tarzan of the Apes, brought to you from out the pages of Edgar Rice Burroughs' romantic book. Hidden behind the screen of festooned creepers, Tarzan, forehead wrinkled in thought, tries to decipher Jane Porter's letter. After hours of study, he has at last found a resemblance between the bugs of his picture book and the girl's handwriting. He shakes his head. The contents of the letter baffles him. He can read it, but all that it means to him is that her name is Jane. And though he cannot express it in sound, he feels an association, a kinship, a bond, a something that was not there before. Tarzan folds the letter carefully, places it in the bottom of his quiver, and rises to his feet. He faces that red disk that is the setting sun. All about him, seen and unseen, the beasts of the jungle, Numa the lion, Tantor the elephant, even the little mongoose, all, great and small, are facing the west. There, hinting the mountain that straddles the equator, is that which all the beasts of the jungle worship, the setting sun. Tarzan watches the deep greens fade to purple, blend again into deeper blue, and then, lost in the sky, the snow-cap sparkles with reflected gold. We find Jane Porter and Clayton watching the same sunset.
What a perfectly gorgeous sunset. Daddy, Mr. Fernando.
Yes, what is it?
Why don't you join Cecil and me outside the hut? It's so nice and cool after the heat of the day, and the sunset is so beautiful on the sea.
A very excellent suggestion, Jane.
Don't you think I'd better get you something to put over your shoulder? The tropic evening is as dangerous as it is magnificent.
Strange, isn't it? That, well, the jungle, everything here that is so beautiful should be so terrifying, so dangerous.
But that, my dear, is life, which, like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in its head.
And this, our life, exempt from public haunts, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. Ah, my dear Clayton, it's so refreshing to find in an army man an acquaintanceship with the immortal Bard of Avon.
Possibly Shakespeare found books in the running brooks. But you, Daddy, require something much drier than a brook.
I believe, Professor, if we'd only rescued our chessmen with which to beguile our evenings, you and I would find the setting perfect.
Oh, you too. If you were interested in the beauties of our surroundings. Oh, but no. Nothing appeals to you unless it is wrinkled with age.
Oh, come, my dear.
Never mind, Daddy. I was only teasing you.
Oh, by Jove.
What's the matter, Cecil?
I completely forgotten to look at our beacon today. Monkeys or other animals might come upon it and drag away the wood, but it's cost me a sore back to gather and pile there. I'll just jog along and look it over.
Dark is coming on, Cecil. Couldn't you leave it till morning?
I'd rather not. It's one of my duties, and I'll feel better if I look after it tonight.
I'll come along with you, Cecil. I feel the need of exercise.
Oh, good. We shan't be long. Come along, dear.
Tarzan sees the figures of Clayton and Jane moving up the beach toward the headland. The setting sun dips over the horizon, and the long, tapering shadows of the jungle cast a mellow twilight across the clearing toward the beach. Tarzan wonders where the humans can be going at such an hour. Usually they lock themselves into their cabin at sunset. Curious, he swings himself along the upper reaches of the gigantic jungle trees, lazily, almost carelessly. To Tarzan, who covers many miles an hour through the trees, the white man and woman below move at the pace of tiny beetles. The figures come to a stop before a pile of dry wood, heaped upon a promontory which looks out to sea. Tarzan drops swiftly, noiselessly, easily to the lower branches in order to gaze more clearly at that white she to whom he's so strongly attracted. Blood calls to blood. Tarzan at this moment would give almost anything to drop from his perch, boldly walk out and talk to these, his own kind. A shyness overcomes him. He hears Jane's questioning voice, Clayton's answers, and inhibitions born of contact with the wild bid him remain hidden from those he cannot understand.
Evidently no animals have been here. I suppose...
Why, it looks as though it hadn't been touched. I think you did a wonderful job in making it settle.
No, it wasn't anything. Only wanted a bit of work in the doing.
Look across that water. Thousands of miles of it. Oh, Cecil, do you think that any ship will ever come for us?
Now, look here, Jane. You've got to keep your mind on other things. You can't be longing and yearning for something like that without going a bit balmy, you know.
All right, Cecil. I won't think of it any more.
There are wonderful things right here to absorb, aren't you?
Wonderful. And the most wonderful thing of all is that white man from the forest.
Do you know, I can't for the life of me understand what a white man can be doing out here in the midst of the African jungle.
Do you suppose he might be Tarzan of the Apes?
I don't know. It may be possible.
Yet the man who saved us from the animals doesn't speak English. And we know that Tarzan of the Apes does because of the note we found pinned to the door.
Well, it's beyond me.
Cecil! What's that beating?
I don't know. I've heard native drums in other parts of the world, but that sound isn't like anything I've ever heard.
Oh, Cecil, it frightens me.
Oh, sure. I don't suppose it's anything to be frightened of, really. Come along. I'll race you back to the hut.
Tarzan hears the weird, compelling throb of the dum-dum. He looks down at Jane Porter and Clayton, but his eyes see only the huge earthen drum far off in the clearing sacred to the great apes, the sacrificial altar of his tribe. Now he's torn between two desires. His heart it is, though he knows it not, that calls to him to stay and watch this fascinating she. But all the background of years calls out to him to join his tribe in this their dance of victory. He starts after Jane and Clayton. The rhythm of the drums changes. He stops, hesitates, looks again at the two below him. The throbbing of the drum pulses in his blood as he turns toward the sound, swings into the leafy trail that leads to the dum-dum. Down in the hut by the shore, Professor Porter and Philander, awaiting Jane's and Clayton's return, discuss the events of the past few days.
I have been meaning to speak of it for some time, Mr. Philander, but we've so seldom been alone since the day the lion...
Quite so, Professor Porter. Quite so.
I wish to speak to you concerning the skeletal remains of...
Of Lord and Lady Greystoke? Yes, I understand.
And now, Mr. Philander, I beg of you, please check this irritating propensity for jumping at conclusions. It was not of the mere mature beings that I wish to speak, but of the...
the baby skeleton, Professor?
Quite so. You will doubtless recall that I brought to your attention at the time the baby skull.
You did, Professor, and I gave my opinion, and I give it again, that the skull was simian, one of the anthropoidal apes.
That coincides perfectly with my own opinion, my dear Philander. I wish to caution you, however, lest you let slip some incautious remark before Jane and Clayton. I feel that it would only unnecessarily disturb their minds to let them into the secret.
Don't worry, Professor. No unguarded remark of mine shall betray it.
Philander, do you notice some sort of drumming noise?
Yes. You notice it too, Professor?
I noticed it, of course I noticed. I notice everything. I've heard it for the last 10 minutes.
I didn't like to say anything about it. I feared it was one of my old headaches starting again. Hello, the hut. Hello. Hear the drums?
Yes. Philander and I were just remarking about them. Perhaps you can explain such phenomena, Clayton.
No, I'm afraid not. Weird, isn't it?
We heard them start. Do you suppose some black native tribe could be as close to us?
Oh, no. We'd have had some wind of them before now. Well, at any rate, I think we'd better go inside.
Deep in the almost impenetrable fastness of the jungle, the great apes circle in mad confusion their earthen drum. From out that hollow mass comes the death throbbing that penetrates to the uttermost corners of the wilderness. Faster and faster, leaping, stamping, gyrating in fearful contortions, the apes pause in their dizzy circling to beat with short sticks upon the drum-like mound. The female apes and their offspring swaying back and forth to the uncanny rhythm form an outer circle about the maddened bull. Leaping higher than any, his bronze, wet, sleek body gleaming in the moonlight, is Tarzan. Pounding in and out and circling, he comes upon a brute of an ape, Jackla, a people whom the celebration is being held. Jackla has killed one of Volgani's tribe and is alive to tell the tale. Only Tarzan before this has killed a gorilla and slain another day. Tarzan steps up to the great bull and pumps the hairy chest in token of congratulations. Jackla's eyes shine with pride. He leaps into the center of the circling apes, beats his chest with massive hairy paws, and shatters the night air with a fearful, piercing scream, proclaiming himself a mighty hunter, a mighty killer. The moon pales in the sky. The great apes sleep the deep sleep of utter exhaustion. Not so Tarzan. Fearful lest in his absence something may have happened to White She, he returns to the hut. Quietly, with cat-like tread, he creeps to the lattice, tests it. Well within the shadow, he moves to the door, cautiously lifts the latch. The door holds. Satisfied that those within are safe, Tarzan lifts himself into the trees, curls himself in a moss-grown crotch,